Ken Carson, career review. I have not kept up or been up to date with the latest in rap. I want to say since Playboi Carti released Whole Lotta Red, and I know that doesn't seem like a long time, but there's really been a lot of new rappers I've heard of, but I've never even listened to their music. And whatever I heard from that time, from 2020 up till now, was really just rap that would be in commercials. I wouldn't really listen to anything in specific, to be honest. And the reason I stopped is because I wanted to make a band and just do all this stuff, but I really miss talking about music, and I wanted to dip my toes into the rap scene and all that because I feel like it can get boring just talking about one genre, and I wanted to get that out the way because, just to get it out the way and to describe where I've been, what I've been listening to and all that. Ken Carson is one of those names that I heard a lot about, but I never really listened to anything. And I was excited, and I'm still excited to talk about Ken Carson because there's been a huge fan base that he's created for himself, which is pretty awesome. I just wanted to know the reasoning behind it, and I wanted to know how it happened. So I listened to every one of Ken Carson's albums and one EP, and I decided I should just make a video and tell you what I feel about Ken Carson, how I feel. Do I get it? Do I understand why everybody loves him? Now that that's out of the way, let's jump into his 2020 EP, Teen X. I had to start off with this one because it has one of his most streamed songs in Yale, and listening all throughout the EP, I didn't feel too crazy about it, which kind of surprised me. I thought I was going to be hit in the face with, a bunch of instrumentals and a bunch of vocals or whatever, and not really. The song Meds had this underwater kind of instrumental type beat, and I was just thinking it felt kind of wonky, but I did pick out the best tracks from this EP because I think there was some little bit of standout stuff, and that was the song Why, Yale, and Teen X. Not the best EP I've ever heard, but I kind of understood what the vision was and what I was going to expect moving forward. Now let me move on to his first album, Project X. Project X released in August of 2020, which when I read that kind of surprised me because I was still kind of listening to rap at that time. I don't know how I missed that because Playboi Carti dropped Whole Lotta Red in December of 2020, right? I might be tripping. Moving on, music-wise and sonically, reminded me a lot of Lil Tracy and Playboi Carti. That doesn't make me think less of Mr. Carson at all. That's just instant reaction. Also, not saying Ken Carson ripped anyone off because maybe this is just his sound and he created it. I have no idea if I don't even know his influences. The first song on here, Who's Next, was my favorite, absolutely no doubt. From the lyrics and instrumental, there was just an energy. The cadence felt very fast-paced, but it wasn't aggressive at all. The melody was very catchy, and that's a common occurrence I find with Ken Carson on this album. There's a certain joy created within the melody. This album was such a fun listen because of the instrumental choices and producer type beats. It felt very video game-esque in it. I hadn't heard of anything like that until Ken Carson, or at least I can't think of anyone at the top of my head. It's been a while, but let me know if I'm tripping or not. And it kind of reminded me of a bunch of indie rock bands that are coming up right now. They kind of have this little video game soundtrack, early 2000s type of sound whenever they're creating music. And it was cool to see it in a rap song, in a rap album. Ken Carson hovers over the beats so smoothly. It's a really good time. I don't think this record was a perfect 10 out of 10. I do think there's a couple throwaway songs in it, but I enjoyed the hell out of it more than I expected. Now it's time to move on to his second album, X. X released in July of 2022, and right off the bat, Ken Carson felt way more aggressive, dude. I don't know why. Maybe he wanted to show everyone that he had that type of dog in him, because before that on Project X, it felt way more like a vibe record. It felt way more like just being in a certain mood, happiness and all that stuff. It was a lot more colorful, if you know what I'm trying to say. X as an album felt like he had a lot of passion and grit in his voice when he was rapping. And for my rock followers, I'll make a crazy comparison, but a comparison that'll help you understand what I'm trying to say. Project X is like Nirvana's Nevermind album, and X is like Nirvana's In Utero album. Chill out, I'm not saying they're perfect examples, I'm just talking about the vibe check here. Nevermind's way more poppy, and Nirvana's In Utero album sound way more aggressive and way more like Nirvana of old. Even though Project X was awesome, I felt like X was kind of my favorite at this point, and I didn't think Project X was something that was kind of toppable. I'm not saying it was like the best record ever created, but I was just not expecting it to be better. The song with Destroy Lonely had a crazy chemistry. It's like they both shared the same fire that was burning inside and they just burnt the house down. I'm not sure who the producer was for this album, or if there was multiple producers making beats and all that, because I know for rappers they kind of pick and choose who they want. But if I had to pick a negative, I will say the album had a lot of songs on here. I mean 20 songs to be exact, and usually more means better, but sometimes it's kind of hard to keep up with that intensity in the beginning and keep it consistent all throughout. The second half of the album was cool. It certainly cooled down a bit, but there was some standouts and highs on it, like Freestyle 2 and Murda Music. Final thoughts though on this album, I felt like there were too many songs that kind of slowed down the momentum, but the highs on here are the highest I've ever felt about Ken Carson. The first half of this album's energy is so good that it can't get swept under the rug, dude. Finally, it's time to talk about an album that released this year, A Great Chaos. And I'm not gonna lie, man, I wasn't too crazy about this listen and this whole album, though I do have some good points that I will point out. This album did feel like a mix of Project X and X, but it felt more like Ken Carson took his foot off the gas pedal and was just kind of coasting through, which kind of disappointed me, but I don't know. Instrumental beats returned back to the Project X days, where it's a little bit more experimental. Overall, the production was better though. The ad-libs are always a positive with Ken Carson. I've always loved his swagger and everything, and his just energy and just implementing it in different ways. He creates a positive mood that I just can't ignore or deny. But man, I was disappointed in the Destroy Lonely song. I guess the energy couldn't be topped like the MDMA song. It was more chill and it had a UFO type of beat on it, which was kind of cool. That Uzi and Destroy Lonely feature wasn't boring or anything like that. It kind of just like was average. It didn't feel terrible. It didn't feel crazy good. It was just like in the middle. Maybe this album was just more of Ken Carson's chill side, and I'm not gonna hate on it. It wasn't the craziest album I heard. It wasn't pushing any like boundaries or anything like that. The album once again had a lot of songs on it, but it didn't start off with a crazy high like X did, and that's a crazy mountain to climb when everything just starts, you know, in the middle. Final thoughts on this album though. It's a chill album if you're into the beats and the flows and all that stuff, but I was a little bit disappointed. It wasn't terrible. Wasn't the best album. Final thoughts on Ken Carson though. I finally understand the hype, and I finally understand why this man has a huge fan base. A lot of people will die for this man. I actually don't know if that's true, but you know what I'm trying to say. He does create a cool, swagged out setting that a bunch of people want to be around and want to listen to. There's a lot of fun and good that comes with Ken Carson, but there's also a lot of that just drags along. But maybe I'm just not seeing the vision crazily like a bunch of his fans are. Of course, just my opinion. Let me know if I should review anybody else, any other rapper I should listen to. Thank you for watching. Ken Carson, forever.